Well, I actually, if I remember correctly, I was making the argument around reparation in the premises of international law. Well, allow me to try and gather the meaning of reparation for all of us. According to a very simple book, which is called the Oxford Dictionary, reparation means the action, of making amends for a wrong done. Yeah, you know why I actually paused there? Because I want this to actually sink in, like we need to grasp, the gist of the meaning of reparation. Again, it is the action of making amends for a wrong done. And amends can actually take many forms. It can take the forms of financial compensation. It can also take the forms of, like international acknowledgement of a wrong. It can also take the forms of like social justice and social reparation, cultural reparation, and so on and so forth. Welcome to Smart, Intellectual, Knowledgeable African. I'm Philip S.I.K.A. Before I continue discussing this very interesting topic, let me invite you to click on the subscribe button if you're not yet a member of this amazing community. And please do not forget to activate the ring bell so that you do not miss out on the very interesting topic and the hot topic that I personally enjoy, debating over here. Well, the Permanent Court of International Justice in 1928 established the principle of reparation within the auspice of international law. And I'm going to quote someone here. His name is George Schwarzenberger, who actually wrote a book called International Law. He described the recognition of the right to reparation as an evolving process. He said, and this is a quote, "International judicial institutions have slowly groped their way towards the articulate formulation of the role that the Commission on an International Tort entails the duty to make reparation." This is pretty simple here. What does it mean? It simply means that based on principle of international law, it is not enough to actually acknowledge that a crime or a wrong, has been done to a population, to a race, or to some people. But in addition, to that, we also need to understand that reparation is actually a slow process. It is a slow process that can or may actually entails many, many steps along the way. And the first step, obviously, is to acknowledge the wrong. But there are other steps that actually need to follow up, in addition to acknowledging the wrong that you've done. And this is not a foreign principle, to developed countries or to the Westerners, actually. It is not a foreign principle because if you're looking at some legal precedent, or if you're looking at some historical context and historical facts, you'll see that along the line, there are actually many civilizations, many races, many cultures, many people who actually received some sort of financial compensation in addition to the moral, recognition of the wrong that they actually suffered. I hope you are still with me, okay? And I hope that this is very easy for you to understand. It's very important because one of the other arguments that sometimes we tend to hear, from like those, opposed to the motion for some financial compensation of Africans for trade slavery is because it is because according to those people, like, first, what happened centuries ago. Second, like, Africans are not the only people who actually endured some atrocities, which is actually right. And this is a very excellent argument, in my opinion, because if I have to discuss with somebody who is actually strongly against the financial compensation based on that argument, that I can sum up by saying Africans were not, or are actually not, the only people, that actually went into slavery, I would say, great, this is amazing. And thanks to your argument, I think you've just provided me with the right tools to actually stress the need for a financial compensation. Because yes, Africans were not the only people who actually suffered enslavement. They are also not the only race, who also suffered, some atrocities. But Africans are actually among the few races and the few people who never get financial reparation for the wrong they suffered. Unlike some other races, some other culture that actually benefited from the benefit of principal laws, the benefit of reparation and financial compensation. So now I'm going to give you a lot of examples. The first one that I can think of is that in 1952, Germany reached an agreement with the Republic of Israel for the payment of over $200 million, following a claim by Jews, people who had fled from, Nazi controlled area. Few years, down the road, in 1990, Austria made also payment totaling $25 million, to survivors of the Jewish Holocaust. You get me, right? Let me give you another example with Japan. Japan has made reparations payment to South Korea for acts committed during the invasion and the occupation of Korea by Japan during World War II. And we're talking about occupation that actually lasted a couple of years. So you will see that I am not here to try and categorize the level of atrocities like that people went through. A wrong is a wrong. There shouldn't be categorization. There shouldn't be, like some sort of levels in terms of understanding people's pain, people, like hardship and etc. We should merely acknowledge that a wrong is a wrong, and when a wrong is perpetrated, it should lead to reparation. And the reparation process should not be a one-way street, but it should actually be a several-way street that also, include some sort of financial reparation. And in the example I just gave you, you could see that there are other people in the history of the world who actually benefited from the payment of some financial compensation. Let me continue with my examples. In 1988, the American government passed the Civil Liberties Act. Why did they do so? Well, they did so because they wanted to make restitution to Japanese Americans with respect to losses resulting from their internment and ill treatment at the hands of American authorities during World War II. A commission, was actually set up to investigate individual claims and led to the payment of $1.2 billion, averaging about 20,000 per claimant. This is something that happened, not even a century ago. Like Japanese American people, who suffered, from some ill treatment, from local Americans, received, financial compensation for the hardship and the challenges, that they've been through. What about African people? Why is it so difficult to even fathom, the scenario or, the context or some circumstances where like paying some sort of financial compensation to descent of African slaves could be possible? When in the history of the world, there are many examples, of people, culture, races who already benefited from the paying of financial reparation. And let me give you my favorite example, actually. I actually save it, for the end, because this one, you're going to hear it a lot. When discussing with people against the motion for financial compensation, they tend to also say that it happened years ago. Like it happened centuries ago. It is very, very, very difficult, to trace back, like who benefited from trade slavery, who also suffered from it, etc. Therefore, we should just wipe the slates clean and move forward. I agree. We should move forward. We should also wipe the slates clean, but we have to do it, and we have to do so like properly in respect, of everybody right, for reparation. And let me give you actually the example of the Waikato, tribe. In November 1995, the late Queen Elizabeth, Queen of England, personally presided over the signing of the Waikato Rapatu Claims Settlement Bill. And what was that bill for? Well, that bill was actually giving reparation for the seizure of Maori land by British colonists in 1863. Can you imagine that? Like in 1863, British colonists came into foreign land and seized local and indigenous people rightful land. They used that land to their benefit. But a century after their invading, which actually took place in 1863, we see that in 1995, the Queen of England herself personally signed off a settlement bill acknowledging the wrong and then giving reparation for the wrongful, the illegal land seizure of Maori's people. And the financial, compensation that was included in that bill was the equivalent of $50 million. You'll see that when it comes to the concept of financial reparation for international crimes or for crimes against humanity, what I want us to understand is that, well, people have the right to disagree with that motion. People also have the right, to agree with that motion. But at the end of the day, it boils down to how you are going to structure and argument your position. And for those of you who took the time, to listen to the previous episode and this one, I want you to understand that first, this is not a wild claim. Because if you are actually willing to put in the work, if you are also willing to approach this topic with some good faith, you will understand that there are a lot of precedents, in the history of our world, where people, races, like population, got financial compensation and also international apologies for all the atrocities, that they suffered. I hope this episode was interesting. I personally enjoyed this analysis. Thank you for taking the time to listen to S.I.K.A Talks, the podcast where strong realities meet powerful perspective. À bientôt.